stages of reading. The stages of reading were really born out of the work of a researcher named Jean Chall, who was a professor at Harvard Education School. And she came out with a series of stages, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, that really track the growth. And it came from we talked about the conditioned response, definitions of theories of learning, and required and suggested a lot of direct instruction at the early ages of when students should have a lot of direct instruction in decoding skills. I agree with a lot of her work, except I think kind of towards the later stages. I think in her later stages, she said that's when you start reading for information and incorporating your reading into what you already know. I believe that happens at the earliest of ages. Even if kids aren't reading, they're still taking what they're reading and mixing it in with what they already know. So I borrow a lot from Chall's work, but I also take in from the work of more recent new theorists who bring in, blend in other ideas from information processing. We talked about the idea of the importance of cognitive strategy instruction that came out of that era, or of more of the sociocultural and constructivist approaches to reading. So mine's kind of more, my idea of stages of reading is more of a remix of different theories over the last 40 to 50 years that we talked about in the Alexander and Fox article that you folks read last week. So the first stage is pre-reading. This is your early childhood education. This is your birth to 6 years old, 4, 5, 6 years old. This is what I also think is happening. I think our idea of reading stages as these static stages doesn't work because I think they overlap and loop in. And I also think as we move to more full day kindergarten and more full day preschool, you're seeing a lot of things that we used to categorize as a later stage much earlier on. So I like to look at just qualitative differences in the reader, not hard stages like, oh, they're in first grade, so you need to be doing this. No. You look at the qualitative reading abilities of your students and you formulate your instruction that way. And what does a reader look like in the pre-reading stage? What do you guys think? So what do we see when you see toddlers and preschool students reading or writing? What do we see? Michelle?
Pretend reading.
Yeah, you see a lot of pretend reading. What do you mean by that?
They'll make up their own story based on the pictures.
Yes, they use the pictures to make up stories. What else do you see, Kate? They might just memorize the book and think that they're reading. But they just they've made you read it 14 bajillion times that they know every single word. And it's late and you try to skip a page because you just want them to go to bed. It's like, man, you skipped a page! Yeah, so they memorize stories. What are some other things we might see at this stage? What about writing? Paige?
Just their name is probably the big thing. Right?
Yeah, if you get them to write to their name, that's like the goal. Because you see a lot of invented spelling, or they'll just scribble, and be like, look, it's a snowman, and he's going to fight Santa Claus with a fighter jet, or, I have a boy. The stories are crazy. So, yeah, so you're seeing a lot of that. So, the characteristics of the reader. They will pretend to read previously introduced books that Michelle talked about. They may recognize letters in their names or write their names like Paige is talking about. And they'll play with writing tools, pens and pencils. They like to play. Fortunately, they like to play with them on the walls and the floors and the carpets. But they like to play with writing tools. So what do you think you do as a teacher to support pre-reading activities? Yes, ma'am.
Well, when I did field work a couple years ago, we asked predictions.
So starting to even ask predictions based on the pages, doing things like picture walks of the books before you read them.
And their favorite part of the book.
Asking them to summarize their favorite parts, so they're doing retellings at a very early age. So even without reading, you're already starting to work on some of those comprehension skills.
At field work last semester, they had a center which was just books that were like 5 pages long with just pictures, and they would just have to tell the story to another person, make a story up.
So doing retelling with picture books. Picture books are huge at this age. So obviously you should read to the student. Creating, I don't think I could say it enough, creating those classrooms that are rich in environmental print and giving kids things like to do scavenger hunts to go look for words that they haven't found. Giving them tools to provide and mimic writing, whiteboards, letter centers. Create that classroom library center where they can go sit and pretend to read or actually read, or maybe like what Kate was talking about with the picture books. Introduce phonemic awareness activities so they can start to make the sound, start to hear the sound of languages and before they start to make the letter sound jump, introduce them just to sounds in the preschool classrooms. These are all activities, and we're going to do an activity scavenger hunt afterwards, after we're done the talk today. But these are all recommendations of what we can do to support readers at this stage. But really, at this stage, I mean, obviously, is it more effective for these kids to learn through reading or through talk? Talk, they can't read. You're just reading, I would ask you to leave the class. They can pretend to read, and that is good for them to build up their, what we call the concepts of print and the alphabetic principle, which we'll talk about over the next few weeks. But they can understand picture books that are read to them. By about age 6, they might understand thousands of words, but they can only read a few, if any of them. So they need to be involved and talk about books. And we're going to spend a lot of time this semester learning about dialogic reading. I'm not going to get into it now, but when we get to the comprehension units, we're going to learn a lot about them. Next stage is kind of the emergent reader, or as Charles put it, the initial reading and decoding stage. Now we're at, end of first grade, second grade, maybe some students in third grade. So I hate assigning like time periods to these reading stages because different students come in with different needs. But think about your first grade students. What does their reading and writing ability look like in first grade? From what you know, or your own kids, or brothers, sisters, cousins, field work, first grade reading, what do you think it looks like?
Read simple words
Simple words. What do you mean by simple words?
like cat,
Sight words.
Sight word, can recognize sight words. And so what's the difference between a sight word and a simple word like cat?
One you can sound out.
Michelle?
It might be words that they recognize when the words that they don't maybe the sight words that they weren't in class.
Yeah, sight words you don't really decode. You should just recognize. Cat, what kind of, and I haven't taught you this yet, so it's okay that you don't know this, but what kind of word is cat? It says, yeah, CVC, and we'll learn about how to do those. I think, especially in chapter 2 of your book, Elementary Literacy, they really go through that bit by bit and talk about the difference between the CVC words and categorizing the words by sounds. So that's really an important chapter to read when we get there. But yes, Michelle's right. Sight words they should just recognize because they're learned. And they're just high frequency words that are used all the time. And they can read those kind of short books. So at this age, they understand the relationship between letters and sounds. You're no longer teaching phonemic awareness, but you're working on, well, you still are. In a sense, you never stop. But you start introducing phonics lessons. You're probably introducing phonics at the end of kindergarten, especially in full-day kindergarten now. And you folks are right. They have the ability to read sight words in about first grade. You want to continue that, like using word walls that you build with more and more sight words. And they can read simple words such as CVC words or CV or CCVC words. And we can add on to that. What do you think the teacher should do at this stage? First grade teacher, what should they be doing? Yes.
Should like provide ways for them to sound out like those small words.
Teaching them strategies to chunk words is an idea. Stretching words, counting sounds, yes.
Having books that have sight words and CBC words in them.
Yes, using books with predictable phonics patterns. Oh, so yeah, CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant, cat. Using books, doing lots of read alouds and write alouds, and shared reading time. If your students are, if they recognize sight words, and they do CVC words, they're ready for guided reading lessons. And we'll talk about guided, I think in chapter 2 of the Tompkins book, they went through the difference between shared reading and guided reading. So those are all methods that we're going to connect to the stages of reading after this. So what should the teacher do? Direct instruction in letter sound combinations. It should say stories. Use stories with predictable phonics patterns, just like Michelle was suggesting. Do read aloud and shared readings. Read aloud and shared readings are great formats, Derek. So using read alouds, using shared reading time, you're starting to really have them read in first grade. And if they are making that connection between the letters and sounds, if they can recognize sight words, if they can decode basic phonic patterns, they're ready for guided reading lessons. Here's the table telling me to hit the gym. It says right under there, also be ready for guided reading. It's hidden under our little
No, like back here I can't see something.
Students who make a connection between letters and sounds may also be ready for guided reading. The connection to oral language? Oral reading, language and oral talk is still more effective forms of reading instruction at this point. Even though they're interacting with books and reading on their own, you still should be teaching reading through oral language development. So because students can understand about 4,000 words, they might, if not more, they can probably only read about 600. So your role as a teacher in the classroom is still to support reading through oral language development. And you can do that by, once though they start to decode words, that's when you start transitioning into guided reading activities. And we'll talk about a lot this semester on how to do guided reading. The transitional reading stage. Now we're in about third grade. End of second, third to about the middle of third grade. What's a third grade reading classroom look like? Third grade literacy classroom. Michelle?
We have a lot of opportunities to choose in our books.
Yes, you're starting to give them choice in topics and choice in books. I use, and I don't know if this is scientifically sound or sound at all. It's coming from me, so it's probably not. But I use a 10-minute rule. For every grade they're in, they can do 10 minutes of their own reading time. So first grade, I had like 10 minutes of free reading. Second grade, 20 minutes. Third grade, 30 minutes. And fourth grade, you should be able to read for 40 minutes on your own. Not that I would. I think giving 40 minutes of just sustained reading is a waste of instructional time, but that is like my cutoff. And then you hit 5th and 6th grade, and all rules on how long kids can do things go out the window in middle school. But yeah, so 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, I use a 10, 20, 30 rule in what I expect. But you might give them 20 minutes to read on their own to go, and they might have the reading journals, and they might be doing reading logs. But at this stage, students can combine basic decoding elements, sight vocabulary, and meaning in order to read. Think about the cueing systems that we just talked about. Right? What are our 3 cueing systems? What are our 3 cueing systems again for reading? Yep, phonological, decoding, semantic, that's your meaning. The syntactic would kind of go across it all with the sight vocabulary and the context. The context can also be syntactic. But they're using those cueing systems. Now they're actually reading on their own. They can engage in independent reading. They can read familiar books. You're shifting your instruction to more spelling patterns, which might include onsets and rhymes and syllables and even maybe multisyllabic words. And you're expecting your students to read with fluency. And what does reading with fluency mean? Accuracy, speed, and expression. You need those 3 elements to be a fluent reader. So you're starting to see fluent readers in about 3rd grade. And that's what the bottom line says. I wish there was a way to like move this bar over somewhere. Oh, there we go. So what does the teacher do? Direct instruction in complex fonts. Notice a pattern here? What do I keep hitting it? And a lot of direct instruction. But that doesn't mean like this form of direct instruction with me just sitting up here. That could mean giving them an activity that has them, has a very specific clear-cut goal that you watch and do. There's a lot of fun phonics activities that one can do in the classroom. Provide a wide range of materials and choice in your classroom. You need to develop your classroom library. You need to find books that are above grade level, below grade level, have shared reading texts. About this age, maybe even 2nd grade, you're going to start doing things like running records and other kinds of assessments with your students. And we'll learn how to and practice administer running records this semester. And you need to encourage fluent reading and maybe the correct spelling of encourage. But you do that by giving them activities like having them do like drama centers, having them like turn books into plays, like I was Click Clack Moo is a great book for teaching fluency. Doing a lot of activities to encourage expression through drama, through puppet shows, through retelling, through big book centers. I mean, this is where you're really starting to transition into the students doing a lot of the reading. Oral language is still more efficient, but you can teach reading through reading instruction. That's what they mean by transition. We're transitioning from decoding into those things are starting to become automatic. Remember how I talked about the difference between skills and strategies? Those decoding strategies are becoming automatic skills for these students. They're in transition. The intermediate reader, late third grade, 4th grade. Now, 3rd, 4th grade classroom, it's starting to look like the instruction you get now. Things don't really change that much more. Anybody observe a 4th grade classroom yet? For field work? No. What about 3rd grade classroom? What do we see in our 3rd grade classrooms? Chapter, yep, the introduction to chapter books. That's it. So the reading's becoming more, the texts are becoming more complex. Jess?
They're doing a lot of analyzing the text.
Yeah, your text-based analysis. So you're not just decoding. You're doing your understanding analysis not at the word level, but at the sentence and sentence level, and the paragraph by paragraph level. So they have an awareness of not just sounds, but now they're starting to get ideas of syllables and fixes, prefixes, and other types of endings and inflectional endings in words. They can now read faster silently than they can orally, which is a huge shift in how you teach children. And they'll probably be able to spell most single-syllable words correctly. You're also introducing longer-form writing. I know this is just about reading, but it's so hard to make a disconnect between the reading and the writing. So, what should the teacher do? Front mini lessons in comprehension strategy instruction. I mean, you were doing that earlier. You still were teaching that, but it was more through oral language development, doing retellings and things of that nature, not really connected, maybe picture walks with predictions when we think back to our emergent reading stages. But now you're giving them lessons in text-based analysis and how do you annotate texts? How do you make meaning? How do you read multiple sources? Use readers and writers workshop. I never know if that should be writers, apostrophe, like is it plural writers or one writer? I go interchange. Still provide direct instruction in decoding, but not as much. My favorite approach to word study at this grade level is Words Their Way, which I think provides some direct instruction to teach them, but front loads it with the students kind of discovering patterns in the words and looking for irregularities and regular patterns in the words. Provide a lot of direct instruction vocabulary. I mean, and a lot of high-value text. You pick up vocabulary by reading, but a lot of your students will still need a lot of direct instruction in vocabulary development. You're starting to introduce a lot more Tier 2 vocabulary words at this grade level, or at this reading stage, I should say. So you want to really build in those kinds of activities. The advanced reading stage, I mean, so now it's like you don't see, after that, the growth in reading ability, it kind of, I don't even know how to say it, because it doesn't really change that much. Like your reading ability from 5th grade to now, you might be able to understand more complex text, you have more background knowledge, and like I said before, content is comprehension. But you really want to start looking at different viewpoints, considering alternative point of views. You're reading for yourself. You're reading to enhance your understanding. You're reading to learn. You're no longer learning to read. Although that's again another false dichotomy, but it provides us with a good idea. And you'll teach kids at this level. Now you're talking, most of you folks, the advanced readers, you might have some in 5th, 6th grade, but chances are we're moving on past elementary school. So I didn't really develop this far because students in this classroom are early childhood and elementary majors. So, but what should the teachers do with those advanced readers? You need to read and study textbooks, reference works, trade books, magazines. Your content that you use for reading needs to diversify because you have to introduce more and more increasingly complex text. You should also be focusing a lot of your instruction on the idea of text structures, syntax and sentences, and vocabulary. Like I said on the first class, the best way to support comprehension or meaning making is through two things: text-based discussion and text-based analysis. And once you reach that advanced reading stage, that's really what you need to concentrate on doing. Even from that, that last phase, they can now read quicker silently. Does that mean you don't do read alouds in the advanced stage? No, I do read alouds in high school. But your instruction routines have shifted. Questions on stages of reading development?